High in the frozen heart of the Himalayas, where the air is thin and the silence is absolute, a young man disappeared. His name was James Scott, a 22-year-old medical student from Australia, bright, adventurous, full of life. He set out on a simple trek, a short journey through Nepal's Langtang Valley. But what began as a peaceful hike turned into a nightmare of unimaginable proportions. A sudden blizzard, a wrong turn, and then nothing. For 43 days, James was alone. No food, no fire, no way to call for help.
As the world searched, the mountains swallowed him whole. Most believed he was dead. But James Scott wasn't ready to die.
This is the true story of survival, of human endurance pushed to its breaking point and beyond.
This is Dare to Live. James Scott was not your typical thrill seeker.
At just 22 years old, he was already deep into his medical studies at the University of Queensland in Australia. A quiet, thoughtful young man, more bookish than bold, but with a deep curiosity about the world beyond textbooks and lecture halls.
He wasn't chasing adrenaline. He was chasing perspective.
In late 1991, James took a break from his studies and flew to Nepal, not for danger, but for discovery. He wanted to see the Himalayas, to walk among the world's tallest peaks, to breathe the thin, sacred air of the mountains that had drawn sages, monks, and mountaineers for centuries. He wasn't alone at first. He traveled with a friend, a fellow student. Together, they explored the bustling streets of Kathmandu, wandered through ancient temples, and soaked in the spiritual rhythm of a land where time seemed to move slower.
But James wanted more than just a tourist trail.
He set his sights on the Langtang Valley, a remote, less-traveled region north of Kathmandu, near the Tibetan border, a place of breathtaking beauty and brutal terrain. Snow-capped peaks towered above narrow trails. Glacial rivers carved through deep valleys. The air was crisp, the nights freezing. It was December, the start of winter in the Himalayas, a time when most trekkers had already left, when the weather turned unpredictable, when the mountains grew quiet.
But James wasn't deterred. He packed light, a sleeping bag, a towel, a few snacks, and a journal. No tent, no stove, and no satellite phone.
He planned a short solo hike, just a few days, enough to clear his head before returning to Kathmandu.
Locals warned him of the weather, of the snow, of the risk.
But James was calm, confident. He had trekked before. He knew his limits.
Or so he thought.
On December 22nd, 1991, James Scott stepped onto the trail alone.
The sky was clear. The air was still.
He left behind the last village, the last fire, the last human voice he would hear for weeks.
Ahead of him lay the Himalayas, vast, silent, and unforgiving.
Music shifts, colder, darker. Wind intensifies. Snow begins to fall.
The first day was uneventful.
James walked steadily, following the narrow trail that snaked through the valley. Snow dusted the peaks above, but the path was clear. He passed prayer flags fluttering in the wind, crossed icy streams, and waved to the occasional yak herder.
He was alone, but not afraid.
By nightfall, he found a small cave to sleep in. He wrapped himself in his sleeping bag, ate a few biscuits, and scribbled in his journal. "Cold but peaceful," he wrote, "should reach the next village tomorrow."
But tomorrow never came. On the second day, the weather turned.
A sudden blizzard swept through the valley. The sky darkened. Snow fell in thick, blinding sheets. The trail vanished beneath white. James tried to retrace his steps, but the landmarks were gone. The river was buried. The prayer flags were torn.
He wandered. Hours passed, then days.
His food ran out. His sleeping bag grew damp. His fingers stiffened from the cold. He found shelter in a hollow beneath a rock ledge. It was barely enough to shield him from the wind. He melted snow for water. He chewed on leaves. He rationed a single chocolate bar over 5 days.
And he waited for the storm to pass, waited for footsteps, waited for rescue. But no one came.
James had no map, no compass, no radio.
He was a ghost in the mountains.
Days blurred together. His journal entries grew shorter.
Still here, still waiting, so hungry, so cold. Please find me.
He began to hallucinate, heard voices in the wind, saw lights that weren't there. He dreamed of home, of his sister Joanne, of warm beds and hot meals.
But every morning he woke to silence. The Himalayas had swallowed him, and the world had no idea. Time lost meaning.
James didn't know how many days had passed. The sun rose and fell behind clouds. The stars were hidden. The wind never stopped.
He marked time by pain.
Hunger gnawed at his stomach like a wild animal. His lips cracked. His fingers turned blue. His feet, soaked from melted snow, began to swell.
He tried to walk, but his legs buckled.
He tried to sleep, but the cold stabbed through his sleeping bag like needles. He tried to scream, but his voice was swallowed by the mountains.
James was dying. Slowly, quietly, but he refused to give up.
He found a small cave, barely large enough to crawl into. It became his shelter, his prison, his sanctuary. Inside, he curled into a ball, conserving every ounce of heat. He melted snow in a plastic bag using body warmth. He chewed on leaves and twigs.
He wrote in his journal, "Still here, still alive. I think of Joanne. I think of home. I will not die here." His thoughts became his fuel. Tell me, if you were the one in this kind of situation, what were your thoughts?
He imagined his sister's voice, her laughter, her determination. He remembered childhood memories, camping trips, school days, family dinners. He prayed, not for miracles, but for strength.
And then the hallucinations began.
James saw lights in the distance, heard footsteps crunching in the snow, voices calling his name.
He crawled out of the cave, waving his arms.
But there was nothing. Just wind, just silence.
He began talking to himself. "You're okay, James. You're okay. Just one more day. They're coming. Hold on." One night he heard a growl.
A Himalayan bear, massive, black, and curious, wandered near his cave.
Unfroze.
He imagined his sister's voice, her laughter, her determination. He remembered childhood memories, camping trips, school days, family dinners. He prayed, not for miracles, but for strength.
And then the hallucinations began.
James saw lights in the distance, heard footsteps crunching in the snow, voices calling his name.
He crawled out of the cave, waving his arms. But there was nothing. Just wind. Just silence. He began talking to himself. "You're okay, James. You're okay. Just one more day. They're coming. Hold on." One night he heard a growl.
A Himalayan bear, massive, black, and curious, wandered near his cave.
James froze.
The bear sniffed his sleeping bag, snorted, then walked away.
James didn't move for hours. He knew he was no longer the hunter. He was prey. Days later, he tried to walk again.
His feet were numb. His legs trembled. But he pushed forward. He crawled through snow, dragged himself across rocks.
Every movement was agony. But he kept going. Because somewhere out there, someone was looking for him. And he had to be found. He had to survive. Even if it meant crawling through hell. Back in Australia, Christmas came and went. But for the Scott family, there was no celebration. James hadn't called, no postcards, no messages, no sign of life.
His sister Joanne felt it first, that quiet dread that grows in the pit of your stomach. She knew her brother, knew his habits, knew his heart.
And she knew something was wrong. The days passed, then weeks.
Joanne contacted the Australian embassy in Nepal, filed missing person reports, called trekking agencies.
But the response was always the same. It's winter. Trekkers go missing. He'll turn up. But James didn't turn up. So Joanne flew to Nepal herself. Alone. Determined. If you were the one who will come to your rescue.
She arrived in Kathmandu with a backpack, a photo of James, and a fire in her chest. She printed flyers, walked the streets, talked to monks, shopkeepers, porters. She hired local guides, climbed into jeeps, rode on horseback.
She retraced his steps, village by village, trail by trail. She showed his photo to everyone. Have you seen this man? Did he pass through here?
Most shook their heads. Some remembered a quiet foreigner, a smile, a wave.
But no one had seen him since the storm. Joanne climbed into the Langtang Valley herself. The same valley that had swallowed her brother.
She walked through snow, slept in tea houses, ate rice and lentils.
She listened to the wind. And she refused to give up. The Nepalese government offered little help. The Australian embassy was cautious. But Joanne was relentless.
She believed with every fiber of her being that James was alive.
Somewhere, somehow, and she was going to find him. Days turned into weeks.
The search team grew. Locals joined her. Porters volunteered. They combed the valley, checked caves, called out his name.
James. James Scott. But the mountains answered with silence. Still, Joanne pressed on. Because hope, even the faintest flicker, is stronger than fear. And love doesn't quit. It was the 43rd day. James Scott was no longer walking. He was crawling.
His body was skeletal. His skin clung to bone. His eyes were sunken, wild, searching. He had not eaten in weeks. His feet were black with frostbite. His voice was a whisper.
But he was moving. In toward life. Toward hope. Toward the faint sound of bells, yak bells echoing through the valley. And then, a figure. A man. A Nepalese porter walking the trail. James raised a trembling hand. The man stopped, stared.
James tried to speak. His lips cracked. His voice broke.
But one word came out. Namaste. The man ran. Not away, but toward help. Within hours, James was surrounded.
Locals wrapped him in blankets, fed him warm broth, carried him down the mountain.
He was airlifted to Kathmandu. Doctors were stunned.
He had lost over 20 kilograms. His organs were failing. His body was shutting down.
But he was alive. Against all odds. Against nature. Against time. Joanne was there when he arrived. She held his hand. He looked at her with tears in his eyes. "You found me," he whispered. She smiled. "You survived." The world watched in awe. Newspapers called it a miracle. But James knew the truth. It wasn't a miracle. It was grit. It was love. It was the refusal to die. James Scott was alive. But survival came at a cost. His body was broken.
He had lost nearly half his body weight. His feet were ravaged by frostbite. His kidneys were failing. His muscles had atrophied.
He couldn't walk, could barely speak. But he smiled, because he had made it.
The hospital in Kathmandu became a sanctuary. Doctors called it a medical marvel. The media swarmed. Headlines blazed across Australia.
Miracle in the Himalayas. Medical student survives 43 days in snow. But James didn't care about fame. He cared about breath, about warmth, about the simple joy of sunlight on his skin.
Joanne stayed by his side. She fed him, read to him, held his hand.
And slowly, James began to heal.
He returned to Australia weeks later, frail but alive.
Porters asked him, "How did you survive? What kept you going?" James answered quietly, "I thought of my sister. I thought of home. I thought of life."
He spoke of the cave, of the snow, of the silence,
of the bear, of the hallucinations, of the word that saved him, namaste. He didn't romanticize it. He didn't glorify it. He simply told the truth. That survival is not heroic. It's brutal. It's lonely. It's a war between the body and the mind. And sometimes the mind wins.
James returned to his studies, became a doctor.
But he never forgot the mountains. Never forgot the cave. Never forgot the silence. And every year on December 22nd, he lights a candle for the boy who vanished and the man who came back. James Scott's story isn't just about survival. It's about the strength we find when everything else is stripped away. It's about the power of memory, of love, of the human spirit refusing to surrender.
In the frozen silence of the Himalayas, he faced death every single day and chose life.
And when the world had stopped searching, he kept crawling. Not toward rescue, but toward hope.
If this story moved you, if it made you pause, reflect, or feel something deep inside, then help us share it.
Hit that like button. Subscribe for more true survival stories that defy belief. And share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that even in the darkest places, the human spirit can still shine.